Hi, I'm Rob Penzak. Welcome to Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century. Now, as you can see, our usual hosts and co-hosts were missing Rick Wingrove and Larry Mendoza. We also have Elizabeth Cornwell got called out of town to help with the conference, so she's not here. And Jamila Bay, who ditched her last appearance with me for an alleged broken toe, was also going to come in this week, but she's apparently covering some march in Washington. Although I did hear her say as we got off the phone something about I'd rather stick a fork in my eardrum than appear on the show with that guy, so I'm a little bit skeptical. So I was feeling a little bit low about that, but one benefit of not having those regular hosts is that we got to bring on a guest. And if there was anybody that I could pick to come on the show, it would be God. And the first thing that we would ask God is, why did you wait 10 billion years after creating your universe to finally create our home planet? And then after creating the Earth, why did you wait roughly another 4.5 billion years before finally creating hominids? And then why did you create 20 separate lines of human-like species only to annihilate and obliterate all of them save us, Homo sapiens? And then why did you name us Homo sapiens when you are so profoundly against homosexuals? Couldn't you have thought of any other route? And then finally, why did you plant that apple tree in the middle of our beautiful Eden, knowing full well we would all be damned if we partook of that? So that's why I thought God would be a fabulous guest. Sadly, God did not return any of our calls, perhaps because it's Sunday and he's busy elsewhere. But filling God's shoes is the very capable David Tamayo. David, thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much. You know, that makes me feel really good because I'm not nearly as good as God is. And I consider that to be a good thing. And I think it wasn't an apple. I think it was the tree of knowledge.
Well,
so, you know,
I thought it was a fig or an apple was what the came
God, I think, is against knowledge in that sense. But yeah, thank you for having me here today. Some of you might remember I was here a few weeks ago. I just a reminder to the listeners a little bit. I'm David Tamayo, and I'm president and founder of Hispanic American Free Thinkers. And also, I'm very proud to say that I was a member of the founding board of directors of Chesapeake, CampQuest Chesapeake, which is a fabulous organization, and I recommend that if you have children, you consider taking your kids there every summer. Fantastic organization.
And can you tell us what we do? I mean, I heard you speak last time, but remind the viewers, what does CampQuest do? What are the goals of CampQuest?
So CampQuest is really a very cool place. It's a place where kids can go for summer camp, and they learn everything about nature. They learn about our society, critical thinking, to question everything. And for example, one of the things that is done at CampQuest, or it's been done in the past, they brought in three religious leaders, an American Indian, a Hindu, and I believe it was a Mormon, to talk about their respective religions. So they don't tell kids, you know, about the religions are bad. They just say, learn about all the religions, think, be critical, learn about science and you know, scientific method, and they teach them about the stars, about frogs, about swimming, you know, all the cool things one does in the summer camp also.
You know, I think that's one of the important things about skepticism and atheism is we're not out there saying don't learn about religion or don't teach about religion. For God's sake, teach as much about religion and comparative religion as you could in the schools. Teach all about it, and then let people see there's, you know, 100 different religions, and there's, you know, a few big monotheisms, and they all disagree, and the sects within them all disagree on very fundamental points. And we're pro-education.
And Dr. Daniel Dennett says the same thing. You know, if it were up to the secularists, we want to teach everyone all the religions, so everyone knows what each one of them teaches and realizes that they really don't make any sense. And it's funny, if you talk to somebody from another religion and ask them about a religion that is not theirs, they will consider that other religion to be silly, crazy even, and but not their own, even though their own has craziness.
Right. It's very easy to see through somebody else's delusion. And you know, the Jews and Christians think it's a little silly that Muhammad got on a winged horse and rode up to heaven and, you know, went to the non-built temple in Jerusalem to speak to the old prophets. But we don't see it as silly that Jesus Christ ascended to heaven, or that Abraham had a voice and went to sacrifice his son on the mountain, but it was really a good thing, not a bad thing. So you look past your own bizarre actions and thoughts.
It's really incredible, and we see that and of course in the show we've talked about before, where religion can be really dangerous. And today we're going to cover some of those things as to why religion is dangerous. In fact, I believe that we have two things today in the news that we may want to start with,
sure.
and that talk about, a little bit about how religion can be dangerous to people. So do you?
Yeah, well, one of those is out in Texas with Kenneth Copeland, is apparently telling his flock not to bother with those, silly vaccines, which I guess are fighting against God's, attempting to punish people with measles, so don't get the vaccine, or just that he doesn't believe that it works. But we had done a show months ago, and we need to dig that up and make sure it's out there on the air, about the whole anti-vaccination movement. And this is a critical way that either religion or just very poor skeptical thinking can get people into trouble. Measles had been, not completely wiped out, but really beaten down. And then some very popular actors and people that had no scientific background sort of took up the cause and decided that without any good scientific evidence, that measles was associated, the vaccine was associated with either autism or a list of other things that they sort of went through. After each one gets disproved, they move on to, well, the vaccine causes something else.
So just to ask the obvious, so this church, this mega church, I understand, how are they doing with this? How's this working out for them?
Well, sadly, there's a new measles outbreak, and so it's important to raise that point as you do, that this isn't just some silly religious people talking amongst themselves and nothing really comes of it. People believe this stuff, so if you're a pastor or minister that you go to every Sunday and you really trust in them and you believe in them, you're going to tend to believe what they say. And even if they're not physicians, and even if they're not lab researchers, if they're out there telling you don't get these vaccines because God doesn't want you to, or they don't work, or they call it poison,
they're unnatural.
People, right? And so now these people are out there getting measles, and our longevity, I think, in the roughly 1800s was maybe 25 years old. Then 1900 was like 40. Now we're up to 2000. This has not been brought about by religion. This is despite religion. Whenever science gets a foothold and we have better hygiene, better water supply, vaccinations are an absolutely crucial thing that's gotten rid of a lot of infectious diseases that have killed millions of people through the ages. And now you get these religious leaders that go out there and are getting people killed. And I would encourage anybody that contracts measles, or their kids get it, that was associated with these churches, look into the law. Right? The law is happy to persecute people in lots of ways. This would be a very valid way where the law.
There is a problem, though. Many states will allow parents not to vaccinate their kids for religious reasons. They don't have to give any particular religious reason. They can't say, well, because Prophet XYZ said that I shouldn't do it, or it's the mark of the evil, or whatever. No, they just have to say in a very vague way, it's against my religious conviction, and now this kid doesn't have to be vaccinated, which is really strange because the state is always trying to protect children. It goes beyond parental rights. It's not necessary that we're trying to take the rights of the parents, but if a parent is being negligent and not vaccinating a child, it's not only being negligent to that particular child, but it's being negligent to the whole community as a whole, because there are some kids that, for medical reasons, cannot actually take those vaccinations and cannot be vaccinated. They've been getting a herd protection that they now cannot get because of all these parents that are being, believing things that they shouldn't believe, non-scientific methods of thinking.
Right, and it's a great point that you brought up, that there's two different tiers of liability that you can see here. These poor kids didn't elect not to get the vaccines, right? Their parents inflicted this on them. And then these misguided parents probably weren't trying to hurt their kids. Their priest inflicted this on them. So maybe the kids can sue their parents and the parents can sue the priests, and we can try to reduce our theocracy here and get back to a more rational and science-driven world, and we'll all be a little bit healthier.
And really, that's a good point to bring up. Theocracy is really what it comes down about. The religion is never content in having, in spreading its beliefs onto its own members and no one else. It wants to push it onto others, non-believers. It wants to push it onto the public sphere, to the government. And so a lot of the laws that are being put out there to say that you don't have to vaccinate your kids are coming about because religion wants to get in there, and it's all about power. Really, it's who controls whom, and a preacher. That's what a preacher does: is trying to control that group and trying to make sure that that group is not going anywhere else except where they are.
Right, and you also see that it's not just the liberal-minded, good-hearted religious person that goes after the political power. It's the dominionists and the ultra-conservatives and the right-wingers, and it's really making a difference. It's probably a relatively small portion of people that would want to push this agenda. Nonetheless, that's the agenda that's being pushed. I think religion doesn't have any factual basis. I would maybe consider it silly, no matter what people were doing, but I wouldn't see it as such a threat and such a violent thing to the progress of humanity, except that these conservatives take over. And a few authors talk about this, that part of the problem with being a kind-hearted liberal supporter of the religion is that you enable all the extremists to really get this power, because we don't all just look and hear somebody talking about somebody ascending up to heaven or being born for a second time rising from the grave. We don't just say that's silly, take that out of our public discourse, and let's educate our kids.
Well, that's an excellent point. That, one thing, though, is that most people in general, the average person, including some of us, tend to be mentally lazy. We don't want to go look for the facts. We don't want to, we try to lean on the powers, on the people that are telling us what to do, so we can follow as sheep as things are going. But one of the things we need to teach our children all the time is question everything, question everything, question everything. Ask the simple question, well, how do you know that? And how do you know that? And keep regressing to get to the bottom of it. Because what we're going to see today in some of the topics that we'll cover is that echo that you've talked about before, where somebody says something silly, it gets repeated, and now it becomes a truth.
Right, it's not just for, we talk about that with Fox News, the Drudge Report, various newspapers. So somebody says one thing, it's all echoed. It's exactly the same in religion we talked about before the show, and hopefully we'll get to talk about Jesus, whether it's a historical figure or not, that the evidence is a whole lot more shaky than most people believe. And I'm glad you pointed me towards some books, and now I have a little better feel for that.
Well, talking about theocracy, let's talk about something we mentioned in this show some time ago, a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it was what's going on in Egypt. What we see in Egypt today is really theocracy trying to get a foothold in the country. And we saw that happening in Iran in 1979, and look where they are today. Life in Iran is horrible. When you look at the life there before and after, now it's a lot of the technology that they have is technology that they've bought, not that they've built from within, and they're trying to get nuclear weapons. And these are people that are driven by theocracy. The imams are the ones that are in charge over there. Well, what we're seeing in Egypt is the same thing. So a little bit of an update is the president of the Muslim Brotherhood, who was elected, a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, was arrested for the things that he was doing. He had almost declared himself a king, kind of thing, dismissing the equivalent of the Senate or Congress. And what's happened since then is that a lot of the leadership has been of the Muslim Brotherhood has been arrested, and the president has just been ordered to be released on bail so he can go to trial. But a lot of the protesters that were out there pro-Islam, the military came down hard on them to try to dismiss that. That's put the United States in a very awkward situation. On the one hand, the United States as a Christian nation, doesn't want us, doesn't want Islam to continue to take over governments, because we've seen what happened in those places. And at the same time, they don't want to support a military that is oppressing the people's views. And so it's kind of caught between a rock and a hard place.
I like how you pulled up Sam Harris's book, Letter to a Christian Nation, and point out that it's very clear to us the danger of a Muslim theocracy and the horrors it can cause. But if you go back and look at George Bush and the American theocracy, and that we conducted a fraudulent war, and that's not just an atheist saying that. There's a lot of documentation for this now. Even I think a lot of.
And how many people went to jail for that?
None of the big guys, but how many Iraqis died from that? Right, a few thousand Americans died.
Hundreds of thousands.
Right, between 100,000 is a low estimate from our government, I think, and Lancet magazine, after doing a very thorough study, put it at 500,000 or higher. That's 500,000 innocent Iraqis that had nothing to do with bringing the war about. They were not out there in the streets trying to get Americans killed, right? They were just going about their lives. And our theocracy went and killed 500,000 people, probably. So there's
no when you hear people talking about people in the Middle East feeling that we're going there doing another crusade, exactly, that's the word I was looking for, another crusade, it's hard to argue with that sometimes, because you see it, there have been occasions where that feels, if you were there and it looks like it, so if he walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, we have to question all these things. And part of what we are taught fairly often is anytime you question anything that our government does is unpatriotic, you're not a patriot, or you're not in God's side, you must be heathen. And you think of all the laws, how they...
And it doesn't have to be that way, right? There's no reason. You're a skeptic.
Yes.
You're not committing some vicious transgression by questioning. Maybe you'll question and realize that they were right and had great evidence, and you'll start to support that position vigorously. Just trying to get at the facts. It's not treason. It's not a crime.
No, and in fact, half a dozen members of my immediate family are members of the military. And so I'm a great supporter of having a strong, good military, but it's how you use it. I mean, it's not the soldier's fault that is being sent over there. A soldier is following orders, doesn't know what is being done there at the high levels. We knew afterwards. I mean, I think the whole country was fooled at that time. But going back to Egypt, right now, there's history being made. There's the forces of theocracy trying to gain over the typical way a lot of churches do. The Muslim Brotherhood has provided hospitals, has provided help, assistance, and community services, all of those nice things that no one can argue about. But there's a price for that. Really what they're doing is buying and getting the minds of the people, so then they can tell them do all these other things. And
I think that's important.
Sharia law follows after that. That's
and just how that ties to America, how with faith-based initiatives, if people happen to be religious and they want to go help the homeless and feed people at shelters, as some of our candidates would go into a soup kitchen even though there aren't people there. That was one of the big faux pas that they got caught. But there's nothing wrong with helping people. You don't have to tie it to the religious agenda. And so if you go to Africa and say, we'll help you with this if you become a Christian, that's a real problem. And if you do that across America, where we'll provide your kids with daycare so that you can go work, but while you're at daycare, we're going to teach your kids about Jesus. And we actually had an experience like that even within our own family, that the daycare really started. They had most of the teachers we loved, and it was fabulous, and it was a great experience for a few years. And then they had a couple of people that were really pushing it. And when we went to talk to the people leading that place, they were kind of like, well, that's your problem, and we left. But it wasn't like the administration said, oh yeah, they're out of line. It was like,
Well, I think it was Sam Harris that said, what is there that can be done with religion that cannot be done in a secular way? And really, when it comes to helping people in hospitals and that sort of thing, religion really is saying, look, if you believe in my holy book and my deity, then we're going to help you. Otherwise, you get kind of the cold shoulder. And in some religions, like the Muslims, if you happen to just leave the religion and not like it, then that has other consequences.
Right. Jason Torpey from Military Atheists and Free Thinkers made that exact point, that we're over in Muslim lands proselytizing. And so if you successfully convert somebody to Christianity, what happens to them?
Yes, and so it's really, or Mormonism or any other religion.
Right, they're killed for apostasy.
Exactly, and in Africa you see that a lot, especially with kid witches, kids being accused of being witches, being killed by Christians, and homosexuals being killed by Christians, and being empowered by a lot of Christians in the United States. So they can't do that in the United States, well, by proxy, let's do it in Africa.
And how sad is it with Russia and the Olympics right now, and there's all this uproar about the Russians are so anti-gay, maybe we should pull out. What about America? What's our policy? Look at our whole right wing. They're going to sit there and be anti-communist and anti-atheist, right? But those communist atheists over there are doing exactly what the right-wingers do against gay people.
Yeah, and I mean, we've gone through this in the 50s with the Pledge of Allegiance, and with the In God We Trust and the Money, and all of that. But so I think that brings us to the two topics we're going to talk about today. Two topics that we'll cover. One is here in Virginia, we have elections coming up that are very important elections that anyone that lives in Virginia should please go vote, and encourage anyone that you know to go vote. They're very critical, and we're going to discuss why. This is for the governor of Virginia. And the second topic we'll talk about, hopefully we'll get to it, is whether there's a birther movement. You've heard of the birther movement for Obama,
right.
Show us your birth certificate. Well, there's something very similar starting to go on now with a birther movement for Jesus.
But I think that second movement's a little more productive. Paul, if we can roll that first clip in here, and we'll kind of see some of the problems we're concerned about our current Attorney General.
In tonight's rewrite, sodomy. Cuccinelli is rewriting his justification for Virginia's anti-sodomy law by calling it an anti-child predators law. The actual name of the law is Crimes Against Nature. And don't think you can marry your way into legal carnal knowledge by or with the mouth, because the law applies to, quote, any person, any male or female person. It does not include an exception for married couples. Ken Cuccinelli has recently tried to lie to Virginia by saying that the anti-sodomy law cannot be used against private acts between consenting adults. This is the Attorney General of the state lying about the law that I just read to you that could not be more clear. And how do we know he knows he's lying and not just stupid? Because when he served in the state Senate, he voted against a measure that would have changed the law to no longer apply to private consensual sex.
Before we even go into this, I'd like to say that, and to assure the viewers that we are, this organization and this show doesn't pick political sides. We don't pick, we're not into choosing politics. We go for issues. And whoever has the bad issues, whoever is attacking the issue in the wrong way, that's what we're going to be discussing.
Right, as we said before the show, because I know I'm assaulting the Republicans all the time, if one party wants to be God's party and does stupid things time and again and tries to take away women's rights and does screwy things about voters' rights, then we are legitimate in pointing that out and going after them. So like you say, we're not trying to be partisan, but we are looking at the policies that come out of the different parties and addressing
out of different mouths. Okay, so about the video.
Yeah, I'd like to start. I like how to start with the part where toward the end he says that he can't use the stupidity defense, because I think the stupidity defense was a prime part of a lot of GOP politics. And this really points out that this is our Attorney General lying to the people, being caught in the lie on video, on national TV. What's going to happen now? Are people going to say, well, yeah, an Attorney General probably should not be misleading the people on law stuff? Maybe he's not the ideal candidate? Or?
Well, and a lot of times preachers and politicians often feel that lying to the people is good for their benefit. They're doing it for their benefit because they know better. And so people don't necessarily have to have informed consent.
That's what democracy is based on, right? That you lie to the people that are doing the voting?
Right. In Iran, yes, I think that's how it's done. But the other funny part is that they go for this nature thing, which you often hear in the skepticism. You see something is natural, therefore it must be good. And but antibiotics are not natural. It's something that we kind of built in and inject people with, right, and so on. Flying and cell phones and other things. And there's a lot of natural stuff. Asbestos is pretty natural.
Right. Cancer
and
is
that
very
kills
natural.
you. Yeah, exactly.
Dying is natural.
So that argument that this is natural and this is unnatural, and who's he or anyone to determine what two adults do in the privacy of their own home as to whether it's a natural or unnatural God.
He's our Attorney General, and he wants to be our governor, which sadly is who he is, and means that if people don't get out there and vote, he may have that right, and he is going to put those policies in place. And we can look in North Carolina, where there's a whole slate of anti-voting manipulations going on to make sure that they disenfranchise all the people who might be able to vote the zealots out of office. So we need to take this seriously.
And it's a technique that is used in a lot of places. In Venezuela, for instance, when Chavez became president, legitimately became president, the first thing he did is started to change a lot of the laws in his favor. Any radio station that spoke against him, their license didn't get renewed, that kind of stuff. And we often see that happens in a lot of places, and it's something we have to stay vigilant about. If we're not careful, we'll be regressing, and that's what we try to see a lot of the times with the very conservative parts of the Republican Party.
Right, we need to be informed. I forgot the exact quote. I think it was Jefferson, toward the effect of, if we're expecting to have a functional democracy with an ignorant people that are, people that are not activist about it, we want what never has been and never will be. People need to follow this stuff and they need to get involved, and they need to go out and vote even if it's not a presidential election. And you need to apply that skepticism, and we'll talk about some other good Cuccinelli stuff, I suppose. But
yeah. So with this, it's obvious. I mean, anyone with half the number of dendrites can figure it out that what he's trying to do is really trying to prohibit gay sex, or trying to bring us back to the Puritan days, and we're trying to move forward. That's the kind of thing that if we don't protect it, we'll start, it'll creep in, and that's usually the idea. It just creeps in, and you say, oh, it's just a little thing. Oh, it's just another little thing. Before you know it, I mean, who would have think? I think if Jefferson, Madison, Washington were to magically appear today and look at Virginia and what they're trying to do, what Cuccinelli is trying to do, I think they died right over again, because it's totally opposite of what they were trying to do.
Right. Well, you look at with Jefferson, what he wanted on his gravestone was how he founded this educational institute that would not be mucked up by religion. And now you look at us now, and maybe we can talk. We've got a couple minutes before break about the Blaine Amendment you raised as another thing we should speak about, how Cuccinelli wants to reverse all this. He wants to make sure that religion is driving our education or lack of education. And
it's interesting, fairly often when a conservative wants for religious schooling to be paid, to take money from the public schools and provide it to the religious schools, once you mention that Muslim schools will benefit from this, and Mormon schools and all these other religions, all of a sudden they say, oh, wait a minute, no, that's not a real religion, or Hindu school, I don't want my taxes to go to pay for that. All of a sudden, it becomes, so we need to point that out to friends of ours, or people that are not really clearly thinking, they're thinking that this is a good idea because they want to send their kid to a Catholic school, for instance, because some of those schools are better than some of the local schools when it comes to academics, but it comes in with a big catch, with the brainwashing of the child, with the indoctrination, and all of that, and the benefit that a lot of this money goes to a religious organization that has protected pedophilia over many years, among many other crimes. And eventually, really, it's a country, the Vatican, that they're responding to. And they're never questioned about their patriotism.
Yeah, and then also, like you said, it pulls all this money, it siphons it away from public education. The part of the voucher program, everybody's happy for all kids to get a better education. Everybody's happy to have lots of money go into the education of kids. But if you have a finite pie and you divert a bunch of it to religious organizations, that means the other groups get less. And eventually, at least indirectly, that's what ends up happening.
It doesn't help the public schools. It makes them worse.
Now, we're going to have to go to break. One thing I want to mention to people is that we are going to be having a contest where we take original images and video clips that you make that have a secular, atheist, or free-thinking theme, and we'll try to give some little goodies away as a reward for that each month. So if you check out our Facebook page, we'll have some information posted on that.
Original is the key.
Original is the key, right. Hey, we'll be back after these public announcements.
At NASA right now, scientists and engineers are working every day to help humans learn how to better care for our home, so that we never have to leave. NASA has a fleet of satellites around the planet that keeps track of climate change and studies how humans are affecting the planet. NASA has a ton of geniuses, and all of them are working for a future that has a healthy Earth in it. Like when NASA helped find the hole in our ozone layer so we could fix it before the problem got out of control, NASA is doing its part. We have to do ours. This is our home. To learn more about how NASA is keeping an eye on Earth, visit www.nasa.gov/Earth.
When I was younger, I didn't want to admit I had a serious disease. Because of my diabetes, I lost the sight in my left eye. Misconceptions continue to surround this monster public health issue. But the simple truth is, diabetes can often be prevented and complications avoided. You're not alone. Understand the realities of diabetes and know that you can manage it and lead a full, active life.
There's an alarming trend in the world today. Everywhere you go, people are saying that cinema is dead. But cinema is not dead. My name is Count Simon Gauntley, and on my television program, Count Gauntley's Horrors from the Public Domain, I make it my mission to resurrect forgotten film classics. I promise to dredge the sewers and ford the stagnant streams of film history to ensure that no film is truly lost to the ages. Count Gauntly and FPA, keeping cinema alive! Alive! Alive!
Well, even though Joseph's been gone 18 months, we've made the decision to keep all his things as they were when he was here last. I finally just packed his toothbrush away like 6 months ago. It had been sitting on the counter in the bathroom. And I was cleaning the bathroom one day and I just thought, okay, it's time to put the toothbrush in the medicine cabinet.
So, I just moved in with this family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
All right, we're back. Now, David, you mentioned in the break that Cuccinelli's opponent, Terry McAuliffe, is also a Catholic. So what's the difference between the two of them?
They're both Catholics, and we have looked at both sides, and we have a lot more to talk about on Cuccinelli than we have on McAuliffe. Terry McAuliffe came out before the U.S. Supreme Court made the announcement, very pro same-sex marriage. And we already have Maryland and D.C. that already support same-sex marriage. And so Terry was trying to show that a difference between him. He supports women's rights, and so forth. So there's a big contrast in their views of how women need to be treated and how us as Virginia citizens should be treated. So that's
right. You said something about how he may have whatever his personal views that he believes from the Bible, but he really does believe in separation of church and state. And
yes,
which Kennedy did also.
Exactly. A lot like Kennedy, he's not trying to impose his beliefs on anyone. He does have a lot of kids, much more than probably I would think is right, considering. But he is into he rarely touches the subject. He acknowledges he's a Catholic. He acknowledges he's pro having the option of a woman having the option of having an abortion or not. And so there is that aspect that I love about a politician, that they don't want to push their religious beliefs on others and respect that. That's true respect of religion, is not trying to push it on others.
Right, and that makes it a lot less threatening. Again, if somebody is Catholic or Muslim or Jewish or whatever their religion is, I might find most of those beliefs silly and scientifically unsupported, but it's a completely different threat level and danger level when Ken Cuccinelli is going to take his Bible-based beliefs and inflict it on everybody in Virginia. And has been very open about his goal in doing that.
So what besides sodomy, is there anything else he doesn't like?
Well, one of the other things you mentioned with Terry McAuliffe
maybe he's never tried it.
I'm not going to touch that yet. Well, we did speculate on that last week. He might be more in favor of some of these but anyway, that Terry McAuliffe is pro-science, and he believes in climate change. One of the big problems with Cuccinelli is he doesn't buy climate change, or at least he positions himself that way, and that, as Michael Mann, scientist, points out, can lead to all sorts of problems. And maybe we can talk about Michael Mann a little bit. He was at UVA. I was a climate researcher. My
alma mater.
Well, there you go. And
founded by Jefferson.
Not by Cuccinelli, as it turns out.
No.
Yeah. So Cuccinelli launched this campaign against him, and UVA had to waste $600,000 in defense over what was known as ClimateGate at the time, of some emails where I think climate researchers were fed up and ticked off and besides themselves of all the denialists, not the skeptics, but the money, oil-funded denial movement to make sure that we didn't take any action on climate change, just like we waited 20 or 30 years to act on tobacco and the millions of people that died from that. The companies knew full well back then. So there's no dispute among scientists. Back in the 70s or 80s, there was the International Panel on Climate Change, and they put out a warning that yes, we think there's anthropogenic, man-made climate change that's happening. It's going to be bad. It's going to lead to serious consequences. We need to address this. then 10 years later, they had another meeting, and yeah, it really is real, and we absolutely need to address this. This is going to cause catastrophes. You're going to have millions of people that get forced out of their countries and have to relocate.
And he harassed this professor, made a lot of stress. You can imagine being sued and all of that. And he went all the way to the Virginia Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court sent Cuccinelli packing and said, look, this is none of your business. Why are you even going into this? You have nothing to do with this.
And why are you going into this? Because it's already been addressed. There were already people have looked into it. The science boards looked in to see if there's any scandal and any fraudulent. The suggestion was that these scientists are, beefing up their claims. There's a hockey stick graph. And it was errant. The scientific community looked into it and said, no, there hasn't been anything fraudulent. This is absolutely real. We do need to act.
You have to be very, very careful anytime that a politician wants to do science or wants to legislate science and really take the scientist out. There are a lot of politicians that want, for instance, the National Science Foundation to run their stuff that they're going to be funding through the Congress first, for the politicians to decide what science should be funded and what science shouldn't get funded, instead of letting the scientists decide what's good science and what's not good science.
And you had mentioned before the show how it was actually Richard Nixon, who's not one of our liberal wingnuts on our side, is the guy that put the Environmental Protection Agency in place.
And the Clean Water Act also was under Nixon.
Right. Now, and these were with a lot of public pressure. I'm not a big Nixon fan, but this was the way politics worked back then. Is if you had a mobilized public and a somewhat educated public, then you were able to push progressive, helpful agendas for the people and for the planet. And that's not how things work now. And that's part of the problem with all this money in politics, as we see in North Carolina, where a billionaire can revamp the entire state, and in the United States, and in just our country, the presidential election, where the Koch brothers aren't quietly trying to shift policy. Right? They bragged how they're going to spend hundreds of millions to try to influence who we elect.
And they're taking advantage, really. What they're doing is going after the religiosity of the people to show them that, no, this is the way it is. Now, they have their agenda, but they use a lot of the Tea Parties and a lot of the people that are trying to get their using religion to convince people that this is what they should do, when in fact is voting against their own benefit. It's really amazing that some politicians are able to do that, to get people to vote against their own interest.
There's some great brain research that shows sort of how people think, and we talked about this a little, where if somebody is friendly, if you believe in your pastor and you trust in them, you're going to tend to associate, you're going to just tend to believe the things. And we've talked a little bit about confirmation bias, how if you can get people thinking one way and then you get a whole group of them together, they'll progressively move further and further toward that extremism. And it's not so hard with propaganda to manipulate people. If you float an idea 50 times, if you keep saying that blacks cause crime, or that Muslims do whatever.
Or Jesus existed.
Or Jesus existed. And that's an excellent one, maybe we'll talk about next week. But for whatever it is, if you keep getting this, beating it into people's heads, just their familiarity with it is what makes the difference to some degree in belief. So if you say that Jesus exists, and I'm a little kid that's gone to Sunday school 300 times, it pops into my head like that. So yeah, he does. I've got all these positive thoughts, and there's no question. And we as skeptics look back later and say, how can people believe in this silliness? And as we learn more of how the brain works, we're learning how so many people believe in this silliness.
It's actually amazing that we're able to step out of that sometimes. I was 42 years old when I lost my faith. So I kicked myself for weeks thinking, how could I have been so dumb? Mm-hmm. Well, it's a lot of part of the brainwashing process. And going back to the politics, to the Cuccinelli part, if you look at Nixon and you look at the Bob Dole and you look at the Republicans of the 70s and early 80s, including Reagan, they wouldn't recognize the Republican Party today for the things that they stand for. Mm-hmm. It's really incredible. So I think that movement has been going on for several years, and now we're starting to see that what happens if you don't stop to cut it right at the beginning.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So John, we got a climate change image up there. I think having to do with cuckoo cooch. I'll take climate change for 500,000. Again, it's important to remember that Virginia, which has a lot of seacoast, has not invested that $600,000 that UVA could have done. I'm not sure how much money Cuccinelli wasted of other money that he's probably not going to be very forthright in telling us, but it does have real consequences. And again, global warming, it's not just about polar bears going extinct, but polar bears probably will go extinct. The vast majority of species have gone extinct to this point, and it's the height of hubris for we as human beings to think that even though 99% of God's other creations are dead now, that we can keep doing whatever we want to the planet, watching the climate change before us with more tornadoes, more droughts, all these bad
extreme
things,
climate, yeah.
all extreme climate that scientists tell us, yeah, this is climate change, and somehow we're just ignoring it. We're like heading toward global catastrophe.
And the argument you fairly often hear is, yeah, but these are these 5 scientists over here that believe that this is being caused by sunspots, and not by, and you say, but what about the 95% or greater of all the other scientists? I mean, science is not always exact, and science is not always perfect, but science is by consensus. If we have a majority of people that believe something, that is it. And yes, you can go against that belief with one little thing called evidence. And you bring evidence and you prove it and you show it, and other scientists are trained to look at that, question. Science is based on questioning the status quo. So if you win the Nobel Prize every time that you succeed in questioning the status quo and showing the rest of the world through evidence that this is the case. We have more evidence for climate change than we've ever had before, and yet you still have some people that just put blinders on and say, no, my politician who I love is, this politician is telling me this, and therefore, I like what they say about the economy, I like what they say about all this, therefore I'm going to follow the whole thing like sheep.
Well, you talk a lot about evidence there, and if I can play devil's advocate for a second, as an atheist, I think I'm uniquely positioned, and to put some blinders on. Our producer wanted me to do some silly skit with a stethoscope and medical stuff, and I thought that was beneath me, so I decided I'm not going to do that. But what I would like to do is talk, if we can show that first one on the Cooch there, how you think evidence is important for you scientists, and that it's the collective body eventually comes to decisions. When you have inspired leaders like this, like the Cooch, it doesn't have to go by evidence, and it doesn't have to be a whole body supporting it. It can be one person. Now, Mother Jones here has that the Cooch has been keeping an eye on your vagina, so now we're going to keep an eye on him. And then off to the right there, you see the picture of vagina dentata, the toothed vagina, which I read about in college, actually. This is in mythology and folklore, and it helps to, I guess, reinforce some of the fear of our religious zealots against sexual activity. If we can keep moving on here to the next one, you guys might need to avert your eyes. These are some boy parts and girl parts. This has to do with actual reproduction, human reproduction in biology.
There are a lot of kids that grow up never seeing this picture, never seeing how things work, and not knowing how did this happen that I got pregnant.
Yeah, you wonder if that helps prevent STDs and help prevent pregnancy.
A little explanation, yeah.
But, so yes, those are the boy and girl parts that sometimes go together, and in most cases for human reproduction, that's how things work. Can we go on to the next slide there? Now, what you see there on the top left is a sperm attacking an egg, those little guys with tails there.
All the violence.
There's a lot of violence involved here because the ejaculate might have 100 million sperm, and they're all hunting to get there and fertilize that egg. Off to the right of that,
before you go, I understand that it's supposed to be the best sperm, the most qualified sperm that makes it there, but I see some people, and I often question if that's the case.
Yeah, you do have to wonder about that.
If that's the best one that made it. I can't imagine what the worst one would have been.
There's been some mistakes out there. If we can go back, now you see on that slide to the right there, on the top, there's a little smiley face. You can see the 2 eyes and the nose on the top left. That's the zygote, and I think that's the smiley face. That's the point at which the soul is placed into the fertilized egg by God. And you can see.
I want to look. Yeah, in that picture, I want to ask you a question because you have some medical background, and so when the soul comes in at that moment, and it splits into an identical twin, do they get half a soul? Do they one kid is soulless and the other one has a soul? And better. Can the soul try to get in and not stick and sort of fall to the side? And I mean, I really never understood that. Any clue?
That's because you don't have the proper background to understand that God can work wonders and that he could divide the soul into 2 or piece into 1. There's also you can have a chimera where you have the two fusing together, and then you have to divide
Super
the
soul.
soul out. So the super soul. So
Those are the people that can dance soul music really well.
it must be. So I think this is just your misunderstanding as a skeptic, as an atheist. And then if we can go back to that slide one more time to look on the bottom there. There you see different embryos that look mysteriously alike, and you can see man or human with his little tail and with his fish-like gill slits looking much like pigs, reptiles, and birds and other evolutionary creatures.
This is a perfect picture that shows how we are all we have common ancestors. And I mean, the start of...
Well, you might, as an atheist, you might be related to monkeys, but as...
Very true, very true. I forgot you had your...
As a patriot, I do not.
As a patriot.
You can finish that thought if you want, but I don't.
Well, what I'm saying is that let's not go there.
All right.
I was going to say something that is probably not proper to say.
That's right. We're going to keep this clean. Okay, next slide up there. So, Planned Parenthood is not very well disposed to Ken Cuccinelli, maybe because of those trap laws and him trying to sort of work around the law and shut down. If not being able to legally prevent abortion, you can at least make it impossible for any abortion clinics to operate so women can't get their legal, constitutionally protected services. More importantly, though, if you notice at the bottom there, we have a regular sperm on the left. Then we have, that's either a Dick Cheney's sperm or the guy that he shot in the face. And then on the right, we've got a Kenny Cooch, a homunculus. You'll see that he was a fully formed individual at that time. And this leads us to the next point. If we can keep moving on here, I think that Ken Cuccinelli is a little bit more than other people have suspected. Now, if you notice, and I'm going to apply some skepticism here, Jesus Christ, what are the initials?
JC.
JC. Ken Cuccinelli?
KC.
How many letters? What's the difference between a J and a K? One letter, right?
Yes,
one
letter.
space.
Yeah.
There are 26 letters in the alphabet. So if it's 1 before, 1 after, that's 2 out of 26. So there's a 1 out of 13 chance, that's it, of being off by only one letter. And 13 is an unlucky number.
Yes.
So it's probably even less than the 1 out of 13 chance. Put that back up there. I've got some more important stuff to go through. Second initial is C. So both Christ and Cuccinelli have a C there, right?
There's a connection there.
It doesn't just happen, right? The famous saying, it couldn't just happen this way.
Couldn't just be coincidence.
Right. Now, look down below. Casey and the Sunshine Band. Whoa. How many members, right? There's 9 members there.
9 members, yes.
Now, let's say that Ken is part of the Trinity, right?
Yeah.
So there's 3 Kens, so that's 9 plus 3. And then with all birthdays, you had 1 candle for good luck.
That's 13.
That's 13.
I wonder if their music would improve.
It probably would. That could be Casey and the Apostles, or Kenny and the Apostles. Moving on further, where does Kenny practice?
Virginia.
Virginia. Go back to that slide. I'm not done with this. Virginia contains what words? Virgin, as in Virgin
yes.
Mary. Vagina,
yeah,
which everybody knows
right.
is the plural, just like cacti, octopi, fungi, which are all those prickly, gravelly, nasty, yeasty things. So I think that we can see there's a connection. Now, I'm not sure if everybody's completely convinced right now about the connection between Christ and Ken, but let's go to the next one to prove it.
So the next
slide will really make it clear.
Will show that Cuccinelli and Jesus
Scott
Christ
is fighting against us, trying to keep that slide up. But there, can you tighten that up and make it a little clearer, please? A little clearer. Next, no. We need to zoom in and make it clear. You got to go forward. I want you to keep going forward. 2 slides, my friend. Jump from there. It is.
Oh,
now
I never noticed that.
That is. Jesus was not the only one at the Last Supper. That looks like Ken, and he's serving the Last Supper a plate of steaming human feces. Now,
it's natural, though.
It is natural.
It's a natural thing.
Let's go off that slide now and get back to Ken Cuccinelli and his little battle with the Environmental Protection Agency. I think we have seen more than enough of that slide. Why is Ken against? I'm going to take off my hat here. I think I've worn that enough. What is Ken's problem with the Environmental Protection Agency? What are they trying to do? Regulate water or something?
Well, it's that Republican initiative from, as we said, it's cleaning, making sure we have drinkable water, making sure that we don't have chemicals and things like that can kill our kids. But that probably doesn't help companies that want to dump things in there. And so I'm sure he'll argue that our economy will suffer for not allowing us to dump things in there.
Right. He calls probably he had some other initials for the job killer. I don't know if it got somewhere instead of EPA for environmental protection. It's I don't know, somehow kills jobs. But in terms of the sewer systems that we have like combined sewer systems here in Virginia. So one of the things that Cuccinelli was battling against was if there's excessive rainwater and you get runoff.
Yes.
Right? He doesn't want to let them regulate because, hey, water is natural. You can't regulate water. We're more concerned about the human feces and the other raw sewage that gets dumped in. What happens when you have enough rain and that the treatment plants can't handle it? They just open up the floodgates and they have to let everything out so it doesn't cause anything to burst. Now, maybe we could build jobs, I don't know, hey, we could work on our infrastructure, like, there's Obamacare. He also wanted a bigger plan to help rebuild our infrastructure. Maybe we should look at our sewer systems and say that a combined sewer system with drinking water and sewage, we could do some work there.
It's incredible. The other thing that was mentioned in the slides there, and I don't want to let it go by because I think it's important, people like Cuccinelli fairly often give a bad name to Planned Parenthood. They said it's an organization that is doing abortions, killing souls, or I don't know. I think that if that was the case, well, the souls are going to heaven before they even get to become nasty people in reality. So I don't know why they oppose that. But anyway, I want to say something about Planned Parenthood, and that is that they provide what they do about abortions is minuscule, 1%, 2%, very little compared to the other good stuff they do. They do cervical cancer screening, which is for poor people, very critical. They do mammograms, they do prenatal care, HIV testing, and they provide contraception, all these things that are really critical for women's health. And but they get a really bad name from the right-wing side, saying, no, these are abortion killers, murderers, that sort of thing. And they throw in the term murderer very loosely, which then incentivizes people sometimes are a little bit off and go and kill people in clinics, bombs, things of the sort, because of now you combine a little bit off with some religion, and we have a disaster.
That's right here in America, our homegrown terrorism. When you get preachers or politicians that are talking with all their gun rhetoric and saying how somebody providing legal abortions to women, for all sorts of valid reasons that the women might need them or want them, but they're pushing, it's not so bad if you go out and kill these abortion doctors because they're actually murderers. We should not be surprised when out of our 300+ million Americans, some small percentage say, hey, that guy I trust that I should go out and murder this abortionist, I'm going to be a hero. I might be martyred, I might have to go to prison.
Go to heaven.
And then I'll go to heaven, but I am going to help fight the good fight in Jesus' name by blowing up this clinic.
It's all based on that personhood thing that they keep bringing up. Right. That as soon as that zygote forms, that it becomes a person. And that's the logic of that is really like saying that the eggs that you had for breakfast this morning was a chicken. Right. Or that if you find an acorn that you now found a tree, or that you may find something crawl on the ground and now it's a butterfly. Just because something will become someday something doesn't make it that.
Right, or that it could become something. Well over half of all pregnancies end in God striking down the zygote or the blastula or the embryo or the fetus.
To me that proves that God is in Planned Parenthood's side.
Well, yes, God is murder. And then I think John Hagee we saw last week, maybe we do have to rethink God, because according to Hagee, the reason for the Holocaust and why 6 million Jews had to die is that was the only way that God could think to mobilize the Jews to head back to their promised land of Palestine.
I hear stuff like that and it just makes me sick, because it's really twisted logic to get religion, to get people to accept horrible things in the name of religion. It's using religion and this fantasy beliefs, this supernatural stuff, to say, yes, bad things happen, but you know what? God had a better purpose. It's when I hear people say, well, yes, I have cancer and I'm dying, but God has a plan for me. That's why He gave me that. It makes me sick because it makes people accept things that shouldn't be accepted, and it makes good people do bad things for a living.
I was going to say, to answer, you brought up Sam Harris's question about what can't be done without religion, or what humanitarian thing. But the real question is what will be done with religion, and then the answer is just what you said, that you'll get good people, otherwise good people, doing barbaric things because they're not thinking, maybe it's not right to blow up this abortion clinic, maybe it's not right to invade this land and try to kill these infidels.
Yes, and worst of all, though, as I said before, is not that they're content, but Cuccinelli, for instance, supports the fact that some pharmacists don't want to provide the contraception, especially the emergency contraceptions, RU44, I believe is the name of it, that kind of stuff, because it's against their belief. Now, this is a pill that does not do an abortion. It's a pill that prevents the implant of that zygote or that fertilized egg into the uterus, and it just goes out. And that prevention, they consider it an abortion, and therefore they want to push their stuff on them and depriving the individual, the woman, from the liberty of their own body. They preventing them from owning their own body, and basically saying, no, I am superior to you ethically or morally, and therefore I am going to own you. And that's no different than slavery.
And it goes back to the stupidity defense that Lawrence O'Donnell was making fun of Cuccinelli for, that he can't use that. I think we can see that religion, if it really just wanted to prevent abortions and that's all that it's about, protecting those souls, wouldn't they want condoms? Except in Cuccinelli's case where he had the little homunculus pre-formed, but most where you need the egg and the sperm together. If you prevent that, then you don't waste that soul. And one of the, I've got a couple other problems. If I'm not going to put my hat back on, but I'm going to go back into that devil's advocate, that I don't know if Cuccinelli is going far enough here, because, sure, he's going to stop sodomy, so no oral sex, no anal sex. What about masturbating? That's wasting all those sperms. And there was a study by Monty Python et al. Back in the Life of Brian journal where it said every single sperm is sacred.
Yes.
And so Cuccinelli doesn't
Now,
even...
the Bible does prohibit that. There's a part of the Bible that says...
Is that part of sodomy?
So what I'm saying is Cuccinelli may extend that to find another way to prohibit it.
He needs to put that into this. Before I vote for him to get that anti-sodomy back on the books over the Supreme Court, I want to know that masturbation has been outlawed. And then the other thing is, he's supposed to be this real ardent Catholic. And I worry that, if you're a priest out there raping a little kid right now,
that he'd be soft.
Right.
Pedophile. And let's say, and to be fair, I was raised Catholic, and I don't know if I was an ugly kid or what, but I was never touched or molested. There are priests that don't do that, obviously, but
most priests don't do that, obviously.
Too many have done it.
And there's a huge cover. There should be zero. And if somebody gets caught doing that, as a doctor, if I caught a doctor raping somebody, it wouldn't occur to me to walk to the next room like he's a doctor, I'm going to cover for him.
Exactly. I look the other way, which is... Right. That's what I'm afraid that someone with such religious convictions as Cuccinelli would do in a case like this. So really, I think if you look at the whole thing, at all the things that Cuccinelli supports and doesn't support, you will see that it seems fairly clear that it's really a war on women. It's a war on the reproductive independence of women, and it's a war because do you see him arguing for not giving out Viagra or Cialis or any of those things? No.
That's sacred.
Exactly. Never mind. But the idea is that we have to see for what it is. It's a war on women, and these conservatives is a war on women, which is what religion is all about. Most religions are a war on women, whether it's Islam, whether it's Christians, some whatever flavor.
And it's a war on just education. It's a war to keep ignorance dominating the thing. Everything needs to be in the little black box religion where we don't know the answer, it's a great mystery of God, as opposed to science and just enlightenment values of, hey, we're humans, let's use our God-given brains that God gave us, right? Or our evolved brains, and try to figure stuff out. Where's the harm in learning as much as we can and appreciating the beauty of the universe without needing God in there?
And you see that when kids are sent to these religious schools. What's the difference between the religious school and a secular school is that indoctrination that takes place, where they teach them all these things that, okay, a woman's place is in the kitchen, barefooted and pregnant kind of thing, or 1950s kind of thing.
Thank you for coming on the show, David. We'll see you next week. We'll be back and talk about Jesus, historical figure or not.
Excellent. Thank you.